Hey everybody, welcome to Pop Culture Philosophers. I'm Rockin Robbie Billups. How is everybody doing? We have a special treat for you tonight. We have a returning guest on this show. So the first time we had this dude on the show, my computer completely died. He was graciously patient enough to wait, just chatting with Brian for a long time till I got some kind of quick fix so I could do the stream, right? Then I met this dude at Heroes Con last year, got to buy him a beer, got to hang out, got to chat. What a cool creator, y'all. I want you to give a very welcome, warm and hearty station and even a pop, pop, boom all up in the room for our man, Tony Fleecs. What is up, my dude?
Station, everyone. Happy to be back.
Dude, very happy excited to have you back, man.
Now, what do you mean tonight? I thought we were live.
We are live. I always say tonight because I always assume it's nighttime where I'm at.
So dark and moody over there where you're at. I see. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So happy Friday the 13th, by the way.
Yeah.
I see that out there in the chat. And thank you all for joining us out there in the chat. I see Nick. I see Two Gun. I see Perry. I see GT. I see Entropy. I see you all.
I can see
this. We love you.
What's happening?
Yeah. How you been, Tony? Haven't talked to you in like over a year, man. How are things?
Well, Robbie, I've been good. I've been working probably much the same as last time we spoke. I've just been buried under work. I've been working on this book we're here to talk about today, Army of Darkness, but I've also been co-writing and co-drawing this book, Local Man at Image, which drawing a full comic book every month is a lot of work. I forgot about that, right? You know, right. I just wrote Stray Dogs and I was like, I don't know what they're complaining about. This, you know, I'm doing all the hard work, but it turns out, no, the art is actually all the hard work.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about this book. Right here, we got Army of Darkness Forever. I got that really cool foil cover. I love this cover. This cover is absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Army of Darkness Forever.
Yeah.
So Dynamite's been doing these books for a while. And, you know, I go in and out of them. They're okay. They're fun. They've had some great creators on them. But when I heard that you were doing one, you know, I got excited. But I got more excited when I found out that you were like following up on the original ending, where Ash sleeps too long, wakes up in 2093 in a post-apocalyptic future run by the Deadites, right? Yeah. And being a horror nerd like I am, like obviously I bought the Ash versus the Army of Darkness bootleg DVD or whatever and watched that for the first time. Actually it was on VHS when I first saw it, which had a really cool cover. Anyway, so like I was really pumped. But then you've taken it beyond that. You're telling like a continuation of the medieval tale of Army of Darkness after Ash leaves. You're telling a continuation of the original ending when he wakes up in the distant future. And then you're telling like the same, like also spawning off from the original or the theatrical ending of Army of Darkness. That is super freaking cool. Obviously, issue number 1 is out right now. Everybody, I have been graced with the pleasure of reading issue number 2, which takes it even into crazier territory. Bruh, as an Army of Darkness fan, this was like the first Army of Darkness comic book that I've read that I feel truly lives up to the legacy of that movie. And I'm not just saying that because you're like, I consider you a homie and here you are on my show, but I'm saying that like as a legit fan of the entire Evil Dead franchise, bruh, you killed it here, man. Tell us about it, man.
Well, I mean, same. I'm a huge fan of this franchise, and I've worked in licensed comics a lot, you know, in kids comics, but I've never. This is my first time sort of having a book where they were like, you know, just sort of do like, what would you do, you know, with this property, and that this is what I would do with this property. Like I also like the Dynamite Army of Darkness books. I also dip in and out on them. And the like, I felt like a couple times they came close to doing like, well, let's do the sequel. And I just assumed I had missed if they ever did the sequel to the original ending, you know, like to the director's cut. And so when we were first talking about it, me and Joe Ryban and Nick Barucci, I was like, well, has anyone done, you know, what happens after Ash wakes up in the future? And they were like, no, nobody ever did that. So from there, I was just like, oh man, the possibilities, you know, like the places we could go with this. And then pretty quickly thereafter, I started to develop like a structure and a framework of everything that would happen. And and I sort of originally based it on the idea of Jason Aaron's Thor, where he had those 3 Thors and 3 timelines, and when the God Bomb and God Butcher stuff started, you remember?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And then they sort of like they tell those stories, and the stories start to interact and cross over with each other. And so I thought about like, okay, well, how could we do something like that with this story with Ash? And I had these 3 time periods that I wanted to sort of focus on. And they're obviously, and the thing with Army of Darkness is that you only have the movie to base it off of with this comic, because Dynamite doesn't have the license to Army of Darkness or not to Army, Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2 or Ash versus Evil Dead, and all that other stuff. They just have the license to Army of Darkness. So you sort of have to work within that framework. S-Mart, medieval times, this type of thing. So yeah, the reason that I'm treating it like it's as important to me as one of my creator-owned books is because it's my first time doing a big license book like this. My first time sort of being given this opportunity, and I like the idea of having only books that I fully stand behind, you know?
Yeah, and I get that impression from the book. Like, it actually feels like you care about the property, that you care about the story, that you care about delivering something that fans are really going to want, right? And you know, like, I've read plenty of Army of Darkness books and even Evil Dead books, and they're all right and they're cool and whatnot, but like, there's never been something to me that feels like a true successor to the original. And you doing the deep cut of the original ending and taking the theatrical ending and continuing the story out there. And I guess the idea is all 3 of these are going to kind of collide in some kind of form or fashion like that, Tony?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, the crazy thing that they did at the end of Evil Dead 2 and then in the director's cut ending of Army of Darkness is that they sort of took these sort of small contained, well, Evil Dead 2, they took these small contained horror movies and turned them into like this big giant, you know, Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court time travel adventure movie, right? And then at the end of Army of Darkness, they're like, okay, now it's this giant, you know, Planet of the Apes, you know, like now it's even crazier. And so I like the idea of being able to sort of play with that stuff and stay with the idea of like the heart of this thing is a gore fest, you know, like a Cabin in the Woods movie, demons and spirits and stuff like that. But also Raimi and Tappert and Bruce Campbell were not only not afraid to, but it feels like they felt like part of the deal of this was that they would do big things with it. So I was excited about the idea of doing big things with it too.
So is the car going to show up in this book?
I think the car already has shown up. Will it show up in a new place? I don't know. I know it showed up a little bit in the first issue. Yeah. It's
okay.
Yeah. Come on.
Oh yeah, it is, and it's right there. Yeah. Right. Obviously. Okay. All right. Well, you got to have the car. That's just part of the whole thing, right? I absolutely love the book, man. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And I guess I know that you've been doing some variant covers for Dynamite. And in fact, you did a really awesome cover for Army of Darkness. I think it was 1979, where it was like a Stray Dogs kind of crossover with Army of Darkness. I love that. I have the foil copy of that like somewhere as well, or like a metal cover or something like that. It's super cool. I love that. So was that where this kind of started? Like you were doing this work for Dynamite and then they approached you with this?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've been doing cover work for Dynamite and a little bit of interiors for probably about 10 years, I guess. But one of the cool things about Dynamite and about Nick and Joe is that I think they keep, and Nate Cosby too, I think they keep a watch on comics. And when somebody pops, when somebody has something cool happen, you see them start to do, you know, now you get to see what like Mark Russell's take on Red Sonja or Lone Ranger is after Flintstones happens, you know, like John Layman, you know, like Chew happens. And then all of a sudden there's like a ton of John Layman books at Dynamite. Like on the one hand, they're like, this is just smart business. We can get this person on the way up for cheap. But on the other hand, like the big two and some of these other companies that do licensed comics, they're not really watching that closely, or at least they're not they're not watching me that closely. But I also notice, when I read comics, like I specifically notice Dynamite has a cool eye for like emerging talent. So when Stray Dogs happened, they obviously already had my email, and we started working on Stray Dog stuff. And then it was pretty soon after that they hit me up and said, "What would you do with Army of Darkness?"
Are you allowed to kind of do whatever you want? Or are they very involved in like where the story goes?
What's weird is I was interested in doing this because there's a couple, like, I feel like I'll always be an Image Comics creator. Like that's the place where I feel the most like suits my like the way that I like to make comics. But I was like, let me try out Dynamite, and I'm trying out another publisher too, with another book that I'm working on, where things work a little bit differently, just to see like how do they do it over there. Like how does that work? What would it be like working, in a situation where there's an editor and they hire the talent and they, so that was what, one of my, like one of the reasons I wanted to try this book, beyond just being a big fan of it, was like, it'd be cool to see how that works. And then like when I start working on this book, it almost is, this feels like, do you see in Boogie Nights when Dirk Diggler's like, he lets me direct my own scenes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so they sort of haven't said no to anything. And Dynamite and MGM, like I had to do a big outline of what the whole thing is. And like, this is what the story is. And this is how everything fits together. And both of them were really enthusiastic about it. And we're just like, yeah, go. And beyond like, every once in a while, they'll be like, Ash's eyes need to be darker. Like they have no notes. And then as far as like, oh, who should draw covers? Who should draw the inside of the book? Who should color this? Who should letter this? Like I've been very involved. Like they've made me very involved the whole way, which is cool because it just sort of feels like I'm making an Image book, but it's, somebody else owns it, and and other people are paid to work on it.
So were you the one that picked Justin for this book?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Justin and I have been friends for a long time, and me and Joe had just started to talk about artists, and he was sending me stuff, and it didn't quite look like what I felt like the book looked like. And Justin was down for, we did a signing at Collector's Paradise here in LA for the launch of Local Man and for the launch of his book Torrent with Mark Guggenheim. And he was staying at my place. And literally that day I was going back and forth about artists. And I just said to Justin, I was like, man, I wish you could draw this book. And he was like, I mean, I could. And so then it was pretty quick from there. Justin's a real hard worker, and he really schedules himself out where like he fits books together real nice. Sometimes he'll be working on two books at the same time, or he can sort of like put a project on hold for a couple weeks to make his schedule work perfectly. But his schedule worked out perfectly.
Yeah, he Torrent, by the way, I really liked Torrent. And
yeah.
he brought like an energy to that book that I thought was really cool, but he was also able to handle the weight. And so I was excited to see what he was going to do in Army of Darkness Forever. And it did not disappoint me. It's got that energy. It's got kind of the vibe and the feel of each bit. Now, in the first issue, you're basically, a lot of it, right, is just kind of like rewriting some stuff that we've already seen. Now, you got the big bit in the Middle Ages, where what's her name again? Sheila? Is that her? Yeah. Where you see the continuation of her story. I really think that was super cool. But a lot of it, like, was that easy or was that hard? Were you like, oh, these 2 pages, I just basically got to do the very beginning monologue of Army of Darkness or something. But you brought everything together and caught everybody up. And I'm telling you, issue 2 sends it out even further, and I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't difficult. The script for that movie is so good, and that the movie itself starts with a recap. I was just like, well, let's start with a recap, like let's assume that there's somebody who's going to pick this book up that isn't, fully, like immersed in Evil Dead Army of Darkness lore. And so then it's, the first several pages are the recap that take us to the cliffhanger at the end of the director's cut, right? Like Ash is stuck in the future. He slept too long. And then I knew I wanted to catch people up with Sheila and sort of like set up where we're going with her story and sort of set up the threat there in the Middle Ages. And then I wanted to once people feel like they understand what this book is, at the end, I wanted to do Ash at the S-Mart and sort of throw a big curve. Because, like if you're reading the story of Ash and he's stuck out in the future, well, then he also can't be at the S-Mart at the same time. So, but yeah, so much of that was already written. Somebody that was, Sam Raimi and Ivan Raimi. I almost feel like they should have had a co-credit on this first issue. And part of me was, when we were planning the series, I was always like, well, I mean, let's make that like a free comic book day or like a teaser or something, something where, because I'm so insecure about, I don't want people to just be like, well, I mean, it's good, but it's, all he had to do was sort of transcribe.
Oh, no, it feels way different than that to me. But I like that because in the structure, like you were saying, like everybody's on board. They know what they're doing, especially fans, hardcore fans. And then you get to the end and you're like, how does it, wait, what? What's going on here?
The hard part of it was because the beginning of it is the recap from Army of Darkness. Basically, a lot of it is word for word. But then that was sort of the first time where I was writing specifically in that voice, like where I'm writing that voiceover, and it's not only just Ash, but it's like voiceover Ash, which is different than like conversational Ash.
Yeah.
And so it was a matter of sort of like figuring out how that would start and how that would read. So it was a little bit difficult, but yeah, I mean, the subject matter is so good to start with that it's just basically just like, draw this, here's what he says in the movie,
When being such a hardcore fan, when I'm reading it, what I like about it is I'm reading it, I automatically hear Bruce Campbell's voice.
Yeah.
Like in that voiceover. I'm hearing it. And then you go on to do like basically what would be the prologue of Army of Darkness Part 2 or Evil Dead 4, whatever they wanted to call it, right? Like, and so you start doing your own thing, but then you go right back into the Middle Ages with Sheila. I love all of that stuff. And then you tie it in. So like already from the beginning, I got the voices of the characters there. It's in my head, the syncopation, the timing of it. Yeah. And like all throughout the book, that's what I was getting. And it was like, even on the newer stuff, I was still reading it in those vibes. Did that help you kind of figure out like the voices of these characters?
Oh, for sure. I hear them exactly like that in my head when I'm writing it. And if you write something that doesn't sound like them, you hear it too. You hear like when it sounds wrong when you're writing it. And that's something that I've had practice with. Like I wrote My Little Pony, and like you hear those characters. I wrote for the My Little Pony TV show, and you hear those characters. So it's sort of like nice to work on something where there's an established voice. When I'm doing creator-owned stuff, where it's like brand new stuff, you're sort of like, you have to almost remind yourself like, oh, this is what Sophie sounds like, and this is what Rusty sounds like, or you know, the new stuff, this is what Jack Xavier sounds like.
Another thing is, we were talking about like Dynamite's done a lot of Army of Darkness books at this point. They've had some really great creators on them, and they're cool. But one of the things that always bothers me about them is that they always portray Ash as very heroic.
Yeah.
And you're portraying him as cowardly,
yes.
a braggart.
Yeah.
Like you're portraying the real Ash, because, when you deep dive, and I've met Bruce and I've met Ted. I almost met Sam, but I didn't want to wait 5 hours at MegaCon this year. So my buddy met him and told me about it. And I was just running off with Bueller from Comics with Bueller, just having fun. And so I've almost met like some of the trifecta of the Evil Dead movies, right? But like one of the things that always bothered me was that people always kind of like played Ash as this hero, and Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell and Robert Tabbert, they would always say, no, Ash is a coward.
Yeah.
Like, first and foremost, watch these movies. We wanted to make a movie with a dude who was not a hero. And even though in my young mind, Ash was a hero in Army of Darkness, and this was my first movie out of that series that I watched, was Army of Darkness. I didn't even realize I remember the first time I watched them actually in reverse order, because then I remember like, oh, Evil Dead 2 is connected, and I watched it and I was like, this is the opening of Army of Darkness. Like, it's the same footage. Then I go back, and Evil Dead is actually my favorite of the three now, just because it's the most like to the roots, like young people making a movie saying who gives a shit what anybody else says. But like when I was a kid, I may have thought of Ash as a hero, but no, he is cowardly, right? There's even that line in the movie. It's like, all men in the future such braggarts, such vainglorious braggarts to yourself? It's like, just me, baby, just me. Dude, you capture that. It's not just the voice.
Thank you.
It's the character himself, man. Is that something that you just know because you're a fan of the franchise?
Well, because I'm a vainglorious braggart myself.
Okay, there you go. Well, you even have the voices of like Merlin and Arthur, like they all like I'm reading them exactly
Yeah.
as they would like deliver that line from Army of Darkness. I love the reference to Henry. Are we going to get to see some of Henry in this book?
Everybody shows up. I mean, like I said, the license is only for Army of Darkness. So while we're like introducing new people, I made sure to go and make a list of like everyone that's in the movie and figure out like where they are now, how they fit in. I would think Henry the Red shows up in issue 3.
Nice.
3 or 4. But yeah,
in issue number 2, Merlin shows up in an unexpected place, which I absolutely love, and I'm really excited to see where this goes. How long is this series planned for, Tony?
Well, it's planned out for 12 issues. We're hoping, like it's sort of unclear on whether or not it'll be 12 issues of Army of Darkness Forever, or if it'll be 6 issues of Army of Darkness Forever and then 6 issues of, Army of Darkness Eternal, or whatever the last chapter or whatever.
Army of Darkness and Robin would be the obvious follow-up to Army of Darkness Forever.
There you go. Let's get Robin in here. He sells.
Yeah, exactly.
Army of Darkness Forever is 12 issues, and it's a complete, it's a finished thing. It fits right in. It's sort of like people like you, people that own a Fright Rag or 2, or used to have an Anchor Bay DVD, like they'll hopefully appreciate the whole thing. Like it all sort of fits together and goes right into fits in your little nerd hole,
Our buddy Kevin from Entropy and Comics says, Tony, could you see the project translate to a feature film?
Well, I mean, the reason why I felt so free to sort of like just go for it with this, because I did just go read everything Sam ever said about what they wanted to do, or everything Bruce or Tappert or Ivan Ray. Like I read all these sort of like pieces and interviews and special features and stuff. And the sad truth is that like unless it's animated, like they sort of did their sequel to this, and it had to be the take on older Ash, like elder statesman Ash, right? And in the TV show, which I think is one of the best fucking, like requel, whatever you want to call it. Like,
yeah, really. I feel ashamed to say this to you. I've never still watched Ash versus the Evil Dead, man.
It's so good. Like,
okay.
It's pure Ash. Like it's Sam Raimi a ton of the time, but like the same, like what you're saying, where he's a coward, he's not the hero. Like obviously the character is exactly right because it's him. But they already did their sequel, and it seems like they're not going to get to do this sequel. So it's almost like a Batman 89 type thing, or one of these where it's a missed, like it's a movie that never happened. So like I'm writing it as if it were the movie, but I can't imagine they would turn it into a movie because it's it stars like a 30-something-year-old Bruce Campbell.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't want to have the burden of having to recast a 30-year-old Bruce Campbell, like,
or even worse, do like the CGI, the Star Wars on TV CGI.
No, we don't need to go that far. Another reason why I was very excited to have you on this week is because Local Man returns this upcoming new comic book day.
Yeah,
I have read that issue, Tony.
Really?
Image loves me. So like I've actually read that issue. Wow. I was not expecting those turns, man, in this. Okay. So Local Man. Well, there's a little bit more developing on a certain character.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so I really, really liked it, man. Like Local Man is a really great book. Right. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You go ahead, Tony. You please go ahead.
You were saying Local Man's a great book, and I'm very interested in hearing.
Okay, well, Local Man I think is a great book. It's been like talked about here on my weekly comic book review every single issue. I have loved it. And here's the thing, Tony. Like I hate to say this, and I think I said this in my first couple of reviews of Local Man, and I was like, I knew Tony was a good writer. I knew he could draw ponies.
No.
But bruh, your art is really freaking solid. Now, I've obviously, since I met you last time, I picked up Time Shopper.
Thank you.
Right. And what a great book. And there, by the way, just to prove that we met in person right there. But I like that style's different than Local Man. Local Man is a very grounded kind of artistic approach. Yeah. It's very slice of life. Your art is really good. Your storytelling is phenomenal in that book. Your collaboration with Tim is phenomenal. And the way that you're placing this, you're doing an image book that is, it can only be an image book, right? Yeah. Not just because it's like creator owned and it's your own thing, doing what you will, but like it's connected to the image. It like back in the day when we all thought in our teens, oh, Image is like a new superhero universe, right? Like, well, they kind of played with that for a while. Then they go in and out of it, right? Everybody just kind of does their own thing. You are totally connecting into it. And then the latest thing y'all did was the gold one shot. Mm-hmm. Bruh. Seeing like a big 90s event from the side, like 25, 30 years later, that cracked me up. It was so freaking amazing. You out there, if you are not reading Local Man, you got to read it. It returns this week. It is phenomenal. I want to know, where did this come from? How does the collaboration with Tim work? What's going on with Local Man?
Well, I'm working on, I was drawing it this morning before we started talking. The collaboration started, Tim and I have a shared love of obviously early 90s Image comics. And we also both are real true believers in Image comics and in the idea of creator owned comics and of like owning your own stuff and making your own stories and being able to do whatever. And so we had been talking for a while about making a thing that was like a image, like a 90s Image comic mixed with a 90s Vertigo comic. And then that sort of like, because when we started talking about that, then it's a lot of sort of like books of magic and gaming and, you know, like this type of thing. And that seemed harder to parse until we sort of landed on the, what if it was more Brubakery? What if it was more, you know, like, what if it's a 90s Image comic mixed with like a modern day crime comic? And so I had, obviously, like you said, I drew My Little Pony for many years. I've drawn a lot of kids comics, and Stray Dogs, which I didn't draw, I just wrote, but that's a cartoony book, art by Trish Forstner. But I had on the side for years been doing like storyboards and little illustration jobs. And I would even like gifts for people. I would draw like little sort of like crime noir-y looking portraits of people, you know. I have friends of mine that have like, you know, these portraits hanging up in their house where it would just be like, here's you and your wife, you know, looking like, you know, like a Tommy Lee Edwards knockoff or something, you know.
Okay.
And that's just photo reffing, you know, like it, like I, in Local Man, I take pictures, I draw right over them. Obviously I change things and change expressions and stuff like that. And the storytelling I had to set up, I do all that, but I can achieve that look by having a cast of people that play these characters, and I shoot them every month. And, you know, so yeah, it was another, you know, like I said, Army of Darkness was like trying something out to see like what this was like. I wanted to try out this style on this book to see basically if I could figure out like a shortcut for just doing a whole comic myself, you know. Like the collaboration part with Tim and this one is essential because you know, like he draws the flip side of this book, and also like he is the major driver on the first drafts, usually, always. Like he writes.
By the way, one of the most annoying things about the PDFs that Image sends me is
side?
that they're upside down. Like I'm just like what? You can't flip this around for me, man. What's going on?
That's how the first one was on Comixology too. It was a bit of a learning curve. But yeah, when you buy the books in person, you know, they flip over. I don't know if I have one sitting around. Oh, I do. Here we go. They one side looks like this, and then the other side has a whole other story on it, which is sort of we ripped straight off from like Youngblood number 1 through 5.
They are straight up Youngblood, bro, and I love that, dude. I just wish you could use the Youngblood characters, man. I just.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've done as well as we could. we've had better luck getting in touch with some folks than other folks.
How was that process, especially being in Image? Like, you got to call up Jay Farber, you got to make sure it's okay, right? You got to call up Todd, make sure it's okay. Eric.
So in the Local Man Gold, the idea was we did the first arc out in trade right now, and then let's do a sort of like one shot in between that sort of brings in new readers, and sort of we can do the premise of the book in one issue and have it be, like it's about this guy and his past and blah, blah, blah. But let's do it as a crossover. So yeah, that one was just Tim and I know a ton of people. And so like, I don't know Mark Silvestri personally, but I know Elena at Top Cow, who schedules Mark Silvestri. So I can get word to Mark Silvestri pretty easily. And like, I'm friends with Phil Hester and Andy Kuhn, who make Fire Breather. And Tim knows Jim Rugg, and he knows Jay Faerber. And Tim had worked with Tom King, whose character from Love Everlasting is in here. And then Todd McFarlane, Tim had worked for Todd McFarlane a few times. And so he had to reach out to the president of publishing at Todd McFarlane to see if we could get some of his characters. So it is sort of like, it's like you're running your own small business. Like, you got to take care of all that stuff yourself. We couldn't just write to Image and say like, here's a list of characters we're using, yes or no. It's all, everybody owns their own stuff.
My favorite thing, the biggest surprise to me in that issue, was Street Angel. I'm a huge fan of Jim Rugg. I met him a couple of times. I love talking to that dude about comics.
Yeah.
And seeing Street Angel in there was such a delight. I absolutely loved it. And y'all have the personification of Street Angel, like right on the nose there. It was such a great book. And I love the treatment of it, where it's like, what's the Image crossover that's going on there? Is that Deathmate? Is that what that one was?
Well, yeah, we created our own new crossover, but obviously like the trade dress is Deathmate.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, the trade dress. Okay.
But to be able to keep it all in the, be able to do whatever we wanted, we basically made our own Deathmate, where instead of Valiant characters, they're sort of fighting against Golden Age characters, because those guys are in the public domain. And so we sort of like made our own Deathmate and had these guys sort of like fighting on the fringes of it.
I also love the idea that when I first saw the solicitation, like the idea that it's called Local Man, right? And it kind of becomes this character's like new name, right? And it comes from like the newspaper headlines. Local Man does this, Local Man does that.
Yeah.
Dude, I can't believe nobody's ever done that. It's a brilliant idea. How did this whole project, where did it come from? Like, you just hanging out with Tim one day, y'all were talking about it? Like, how did it come to fruition?
Yeah, like I said, it was just Tim. Tim said we should do something together, and it was just through sort of like talking, seeing each other at conventions. The main, like, where we sort of realized that both of us love these books, because people love early 90s Image comics in different ways. Like, people hate them. B, people love them like they love The Room or whatever, like.
Yes, okay. Like, ironically so love them, right?
Or like me and Tim, or I think me even more than Tim, like I love them because they're my, they're the comics that came out when I was 14. It's that time period. It's like your favorite Saturday Night Live, your favorite comics, your favorite music, Dude,
you so just hit the nail on the head there, bro. You're right. Like, it's all downhill after 15 years old.
So I sort of fetishized the idea of these comics and where they came from. And like, I always think about like, Extreme Studios and what it was. Whenever I meet somebody that worked at one of those places, I want to hear like, just like what, not even the dirt, but just like, what was it like when you went in the morning? Who was there? Like, because I've worked in studios and I've made comics, and I've like I said, I've sort of fetishized the idea of what these guys were doing, where like what it was like in those days. Also, because there was so much money flying around, and it's just like, what a crazy time for comics,
I know, you got like 20-year-old Rob Liefeld, just a millionaire overnight, basically, just giving people cars to come and work for him, right?
Well, and especially him, as soon as he and Jim Lee see like, oh, these books sell that much, okay, well, we got Brigade, we got Bloodstrike, we got new, just like crank. And I love the idea of that sort of like unhinged creativity, where it's just like opportunity meets hustle meets, just like unsuspecting comic market that was just like, like, what is happening? What's all this?
The thing I love the most about early Image, and I've been like revisiting a lot of early Image stuff, is just like, I always thought like, oh, Vertigo was they're the ones that like that's the books I like, right? Those are the ones that are like about good concepts, great creative teams, they own it. Then you learn more about Vertigo and you're like, well, it's a little bit more fishy than that, right? But like Image was straight up like, nah, screw it. Marvel's not taking care of you, DC's not taking care of you. Do it yourself. You are the brand, Rob Liefeld. You are the brand, Jim Lee, Todd McFarlane, Mark Silvestri, Eric Larson. You are the reason people are reading Spider-Man and X-Men and this and that, right? And then even though some of that stuff, some of it's downright atrocious, right? But the vibe, the freedom, the energy, that is there, man. Yeah. And you can see just these young creators being like, you know what? I am good enough. Yeah. I don't need the backing of this big corporation, right? And knowing all the stories we know about like Lee and Kirby and Finger and Kane and all this kind of stuff, like Image Comics is the most important thing to happen to comic books since Jack Kirby and Stan Lee's collaboration, in my opinion. Like it's that big of a deal, man. Like, I mean, it really is, dude.
I mean, if you look at what, like the books that we're still reading, the footprint that it's had, for sure, like just building, I always say sort of like accidentally building a paradise. Cause like those guys were like, all great dudes, but none of them was just like, let's build a place for all creators to be able to own their own work. They were like, we're getting screwed. Let's go build a good situation for ourselves. And then just by not happenstance, but just like the way it worked out, it also was a paradise for everybody else. Cause it is, like I've had a hit at Image Comics and there's nothing else even relatively close to what it's like to have it. I've had a hit at Image Comics and I sold that same book as a movie. And if the movie made $100 million, like it came out and made $100 million at the box office, I would not have made as much money as I made just out of Image Comics.
Yeah.
So it's like incredible what they did, changed many people's lives.
Yeah. I was talking to a creator. I won't name them, but this creator basically told me the only way to really be successful and make money in comics right now is to have an Image book that pops.
Yeah.
And it just, like, you're right. Like Todd and the gang, they were just trying to make a better deal for themselves. Right. But it like morphed and over time it had to evolve. There were ups and downs in those first 10 years of Image. And then Walking Dead, Robert Kirkman had a lot to do with that too. Right. Yeah. Like of continuing that. And Image is in such a place right now. They've been my favorite publisher for years because they just allow people to do what they want to do and you put it out. Right. And I mean, like you said, like doing Local Man, that's you and Tim. Y'all got to put that together. Like you're not getting any outside help necessarily, right? Because they're just distribution basically in a way. Really solid stuff with Local Man. I like that you mentioned the Ed Brubaker influence because that's what I'm vibing with, and it feels like 90s extreme Image by way of not just Ed Brubaker but like Michael Lark. Mm-hmm. It feels like Scene of the Crime to me, right? If people remember that book, like. Absolutely freaking phenomenal. Your art style is incredibly grounded. And so it's so fun to see these ridiculous extreme characters in that environment. It's kind of like very boys feeling at the same time, like meaning that like you take the mythical and you bring it down to the gutter of reality at times, but yours is very real, very small town. Now I know that you grew up in like Colorado, right? Yeah. Were you like from a small town? Is that like vibe from you? Is that from Tim? Like how did you come up with that?
It's from both of us, mainly from Tim. Like that's Tim's actual childhood, was living in a town basically about the same as Farmington. And I grew up in Colorado, but my parents are both from like tiny towns in Nebraska. So basically once school let out every summer, we would be Nebraskan for about two months or so. And then we would go back home and get ready for school to start up again. So I spent a lot of time sort of like in summertime, small town, not like school and winter times. Well, Christmas time, but so a big part of that is trying to sort of like make this feel not just like a superhero in real life, but a superhero specifically in the Midwest in real life. Like the way that the other people in town react to him, and sort of like that, like don't get too big for your britches, like to take that shit back to California type energy.
Yeah, I get a little bit of a Coen Brothers vibe from the series as well.
I'll take it. Yeah, would love that.
Well, there you go, man. Absolutely doing a great job with Army of Darkness and Local Man.
Thank you.
We're both wearing Argento shirts tonight because this is where we truly bonded, Tony.
Where we live, yeah.
Like you were like, who's this freaking kid trying to get me? We're like near the same age. Like, who's this dude trying to get me on his channel, whatever. But like, I really feel like we bonded when I talked about the Demons cover on Stray Dogs #4, right? And we went on this whole tangent on Argento. We just recently covered Opera here. I just want to know real quick, have you seen Dark Glasses yet?
I put it on Shudder, and I started it, and I feel like I stopped it. I haven't gone back to it. It's sitting in my queue, and I haven't gone back to it. Should I?
Yes. I actually really like it. Like it's not going back to like 70s or 80s Argento, but it's better than most of his recent efforts, right? And meaning recent, like the last like 30 years. Like
it's better than like the Mother of Tears and Stendhal Syndrome and
well, I like Mother of Tears.
Is it Mother of Tears or Sadness? What is it?
Mother of Tears. Mother of Tears. Yeah, the third part in the Mother of the Mother trilogy. Yeah. I actually really liked Dark Glasses. It felt like a little bit of a return to form, but like it felt like Dark Glasses is the movie that should have followed Opera.
Right.
Yeah. Like it's like I actually really liked it. I hope that he does more. Obviously, Dario's getting a little bit older or whatnot, but
I love that he's still cranking. Love that he's still out there doing it.
But this is his first movie in like over 10 years, I think. Like he hadn't done anything in forever.
Was that Dracula? That must have been like 2005, 2010.
Yeah, Dracula was probably like his last one, maybe like 2010, something like that. And then he did before that he did the Masters of Horror stuff, which we've talked about. And I love those. Yeah. Those are great. But yeah, I would recommend Dark Glasses. I felt like I was the only person on the internet that liked it, but like I don't know, man. I really did like it. I thought it was good. I thought it was solid. It's not perfect, but I thought it was good. Kind of like how I felt about the new Exorcist film, where it was good but not perfect. Oh, you didn't like the new Exorcist film?
Hard disagree. It was both not perfect and not good.
I just filmed a review for it last night. That's going to be part of Horror Fest next week on Blood Splatter Chatter. Everybody, and me and him felt like the only people on the internet that like didn't hate it as much as anybody else. What did you think about the new Exorcist, man?
There was somebody sitting next to us on their phone, and usually I will, say something, but I was just like, who cares? It doesn't even matter. I'm watching this. I'm like, it's not like they could ruin this movie.
You got to be like, you at least like, you got to admit, like the first act was really solid in that movie, right?
Yeah, the missing kids part, like that was stressful and good. And like even the Haiti part at the beginning, that was surprising and good. But yeah, once it gets to the actual Exorcist part and the possession and it just sort of fell apart for me. It just wasn't scary enough. It was like when they finally got into that first movie, so perfect, and maybe it's sort of like, sealed in amber or whatever, like it's untouchably great. And so it's not like this is the first bad Exorcist either, like
no, the first bad Exorcist was number 2.
Yeah. But I just felt like, because I really liked that first Halloween remake that he did, or not remake, but requel, whatever you want to call it, right? Reboot. But I did not like the other two of that, and I was like, all right, well, fresh slate. Maybe he'll have interesting ideas about what happens after Exorcist. And turns out, no, he did not.
Right, it's literally the same theme as those movies, right? And I'm really surprised that in the middle of this movie, we didn't have like a hospital filled with people going, "Satan dies tonight." Right. Satan dies tonight. Like, I had a very, very low expectation. I don't like any of those 3 Halloween movies that David Gordon Green did. Like, I just don't. Like, there are elements of kills that I like. All of those elements are the stuff that's like the recreation of the original night in the 70s.
Yeah.
Like that's what I like. Like, and I've been thinking about it. Me and some friends have been talking about this. How do you reinvigorate Halloween and Friday the 13th? I'm like, I'll tell you what you do. You just make movies set in the time period.
In the world. Yeah.
Yeah. Just make a Halloween movie set in 1979. Make a Jason movie set in 1984. You know, set it between 3 and final chapter, and just like play with that for a while, right?
Yeah.
Keep it period. Like get Ty West to do a Halloween movie. Like in A24 almost had Halloween, man. I was like, could you imagine that? But Miramax has it. They're going to do
TV show or something,
their own thing with it. Like they keep saying that we want to do a Halloween cinematic universe. I'm like, what does that mean? Is Tom Atkins going to show up? Does like Tyler Maines, Michael Myers go up against Nick Castle? Like
the little girl.
Like, what does this even mean? Yeah, you're bringing back Danielle Harris. Like, come on. Come on.
Paul Rudd back in here.
Yeah, listen, I bet Paul Rudd would do it. He would be a better Tommy than Anthony Michael Hall. Like whatever that decision was. What are some good horror movies that you watched recently, though? We haven't really talked since a little bit over a year. Though. Like, did you like Barbarian? That was one I thought was super solid.
Of course, I love Barbarian. You know, I just saw a couple nights ago. Is in theaters now. Is Where Evil Lurks, Argentinian horror movie.
Okay.
It's like a demon possession, sort of like post-apocalyptic. It's sort of like post-religion demon movie, where people get possessed in a town, and it's like this infection that spreads, and they call them the Rottens, and it is fucked. Like it is super gross and super crazy. It doesn't hold together 1,000%. But as far as like shock stuff and like tension and sort of like originality, it does a ton of cool stuff. Highly recommended. I wouldn't like Barbarian. I could recommend and say like it's solid. You know, it's like a good movie. This one I'm like highly recommended. It's fucked up.
Yeah, I've heard about that one. I got to check that one out. Were you a fan last year of X or Pearl at all? I thought those movies were phenomenal, man.
Yeah, super excited about the new one of those. And I liked Infinity Pool too. I'm down. I'm like, whatever Mia Goth wants to do, I'll go check that out. That lady's real freaky.
Yeah, she's great, dude.
She's a real weirdo. Yeah, what's the next one called? The
Maxine.
third Pearl?
Right, Maxine, yeah,
on board for that.
Super pumped for that. It made me go back and like check out some of Ty's previous films.
Oh,
and I watched like House of the Devil. Is that what it's called, or something like that? Like in what's the?
Did you watch the one that he did that's like a Vice documentary about a cult?
No, I did not.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I don't remember what it's called, but it's on streaming for free. I don't know for free. I think it's like on Peacock or.
I have Peacock, so Peacock, a very underrated streaming service for horror, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They've all got these horror libraries that even if they don't make a big deal about it, you can just like, oh, they've got this. But yeah, the Ty West, he did one because he's great at like aping styles, which is something that I like to do and something that I respect when somebody does it seamlessly, you know?
Yeah.
So obviously, like in X, he's doing like a Texas Chainsaw, you know. And in House of the Devil, he's doing like his sort of like 70s, you know, like almost Italian, like, you know, it feels like one of those movies that we like.
Yeah.
And this one he did like a Vice documentary about a cult. And so it's just like it feels exactly like that. Like it's cool and freaky.
I also just watched I guess within the last year, I don't remember when we covered it. Maybe it was last year during Horror Fest, but I finally watched You're Next, which really blew me away. And Ty West is in that as a character, but that movie was really surprising to me. This is a lot of people's favorite this year. It's kind of related to a project you're working on currently. I just want to know, what did you think about Evil Dead Rise? Oh,
I dug it. I didn't think it was as good as the remake. But I think there's not a bad, so far, the most flawless horror franchise. Like, I think there's not a bad Evil Dead Army of Darkness movie. So even if this one I think is sort of like towards the bottom, you know, like it's it's not as good as the remake, and the remake's not as good as I love that remake. Like, I thought the remake was a great take.
I still have never seen the remake, bro.
Really?
Never.
Yeah. So good. You got to see that remake.
Yeah,
I mean,
everybody keeps telling me that, man. I got to do it.
yeah, it's really good. I think that, including the TV show, I'm excited for you because there's a lot of Evil Dead content that
I
you're not
know if
up
you're
on.
such a fan of the franchise,
Yeah,
like, and here's the thing, I
you're
didn't
like an
really like Evil
originalist.
Dead Rise. Like, I didn't really like it. Like, it was just kind of, I don't know. I thought there was a lot of missed opportunity. I think they like got rid of a lot of characters very quickly. That
Yeah,
like the idea of like the evil arising in an apartment building, dude, that
cool.
sounds great, right?
Yeah.
And like Jeff Lemire and Andrea Sorrentino are killing it right now with that concept with Tenement in a way, right? But like Evil Dead Rise to me just felt
Infidel.
like it got to it. It got to like the second act break too soon, almost in a way. Like it felt like it was structured weird, and I don't know.
Yeah,
I didn't like it as much as other people.
I felt like that mother, that character was so iconic and great. You know, like I like just watching it, I was like, what a creep. You know, like what a disgusting monster.
Yeah.
And then like they were so brutal with those kids. They're just like, woof, this movie goes. You know, like they don't care at all. Yeah, like I said, it's nowhere near the top of the Army of Darkness Evil Dead heap, but I liked it just fine. And like I think if you had seen the remake already,
Okay.
I wasn't going like I wish they'd done other stuff in this because the remake covers so much ground that you're just like, I'm just happy to see them do any sort of Deadite, you know, Necronomicon evil business out in there. And I like that they're sort of playing with the 3 Necronomicons lore, something we're going to play with a little bit in this book.
Ooh, very cool, man. Very excited to hear that. Where was I going? I had one more thing to get to. And now I'm blanking. Tony, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. I'm going to think of it in just a second.
After you just text me.
Yeah, I'll text you. Is there anything upcoming that you can talk about? What you got coming up?
Nothing I can talk about. Somebody in the comments was asking. Trish and I do have a new book that will be out springtime next year at Image.
Is that the one you were talking about last year in Charlotte with me?
Probably, yeah. We've been working on it.
Okay.
For this whole time. It's the follow-up to Stray Dogs.
Nice.
If you like Stray Dogs and don't hate cats, this one is for you. We're right now working on the we're working on the 4th issue of that.
Stray Cats, by the way, is coming soon. Brian Seltzer is going to be involved in that one, right?
Us, the whole orchestra is involved. Yeah. But yeah, we're working on that. I'm doing another project that we just that's at a different publisher. Is a creator-owned thing though, and we just lined up an artist that I'm super excited about. So like an old friend of mine, an old collaborator of mine. So yeah, I hate doing like non-announcement announcements, but March, April of next year are going to be real. If you like a Tony Fleecs comic, they're going to be fucking lousy with them around March or April next year. Because this thing will still be going on, and Local Man will still be going on, and then these 2 new books will be going on. So it's
hopefully we can have you back to discuss that when it happens, when it comes up, and maybe we can have Trish on as well with you. That would be amazing. Meeting both of y'all last year in person was absolutely a treat, bruh. And if you ever see Tony at a con, he likes Sam Adams Boston Lager. Just go ahead and just go ahead and get a couple of them set up for him. I remember what I was going to say. You mentioned Evil Dead being a very consistent franchise.
Yeah.
I think Scream is a very consistent franchise. Didn't really like Scream 5, but I did really actually like Scream 6, even though my problems with Scream 6 were a lot of the same problems with Scream 5, mostly. Nobody dies. What did you think?
I'm the opposite. I liked 5, don't like 6, don't like 3.
3's the worst. 3's the worst. Like automatically, 3 is the worst. Let's be honest, right?
So, but I'm okay with 4. Like I like that film festival part, and like I like the idea of Stab becoming like a horror fandom. I thought that was cool, and I fucking love I think 5 is the most on brand Scream since 1 and 2. Like they're doing the take on what this remake, sequel, requel, reboot thing is. They give it a name. You know, I think requel is perfect. And then they do exactly what they say. You know, you bring back old beloved characters, you introduce new characters, you kill somebody to let them know you mean business. Like they do all that Force Awakens shit. And then like I thought it was perfect. Like not perfect, but I super dug that one. And then 6, I was just like, they didn't have a take. You know, they're saying like, well, we're gonna do what's a saga. or whatever. Like, how do you survive a franchise? Or
Yeah.
I don't even know. Like, because there are no rules for it. There's
Dude, the
nothing
only take they
specific
had
about
in that was it's in New York.
Yes, if you want to make it that, that's cool. How do you survive the out of the box sequel? You know, like this, like even if that was their take, you know, how do you survive a Jason Takes Manhattan, or you know, fucking Paranormal Activity, the marked ones, or what, you know, like one of these ones where they go somewhere else? Then I'm on board with that. But
No,
I did
that
not.
actually makes a lot of sense.
Was
My
not,
problem
was
with
not
both Scream 5 and 6 is that like half the people they killed don't die.
Yes.
Like I don't. Scream 6 had one of my favorite moments in a Scream movie where you see for the first time two ghost faces just going to town on somebody.
Yeah.
A dude who's already been stabbed like 40 times gets stabbed 69 times this time. He's alive.
I loved seeing all the old Scream actors show up on social media, just going like, well, I guess that means I'm okay. I could come back. This is great news.
Exactly, right?
I was only stabbed 3 times.
I'll be at Scarefest next week. David Arquette's going to be there, and I'm excited to meet him. And I'm going to be like, bruh, they did you wrong in Scream 5. Dewey is way smarter than that. Whatever. All right, everybody go check out Army of... Oh, go ahead, Tony.
Speaking of Army of Darkness, I'm not going to be there, but Sam Raimi is at Monsterpalooza this weekend in Pasadena. So anybody that wants to get their book signed by him, that would be the craziest thing I ever saw if you had a signed Army of Darkness Forever by Sam Raimi. I'll be at Pulp Fiction in Long Beach this weekend signing Army of Darkness books. And then next week I'll be at Golden Apple. And then at the end of the month, I'm going to be all over Northern California at Cape and Cowl Comics and Zeppelin Comics and the Berkeley Comics Comic-Con. So I'm all over California this month, pushing this book and trying to make sure everybody who ever heard of Army of Darkness gets a hold of this book.
Well, go grab the book right now. As an Army of Darkness fan, as an Evil Dead fan, as a horror fan, I highly encourage it. It is great. It's my favorite Army of Darkness comic I've ever read. I've read this one. I've read the second one. Y'all are in for a treat. Check out Time Shopper. That's still available in places. Check out Local Man, returning in shops this week. Very excited for that. Tony, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here. Excited to come back soon.
Absolutely. All right, PCP Army, thank you so much for your support. Station and Pop